So this is going to be a quick and dirty accompaniment to the material system chapter. And so what I've got is my test scene here. It's a bit different from the versions that you saw in Cheetah 3D because I've lost the test pattern. But anyway, there's and my elephant model. It has no texture on it at the moment, so it's just being rendered as the default texture. And it's just got a plain checkerboard against the background as a backdrop for now. So let's have a look. Let's suppose we want to create a flat colored material. Well, here's a flat colored material. What I'm going to do is take all of these materials and delete them. Let's create a new material and, let me not delete all of them. Let's delete all of them except for the background. Alright, so create a new material and we're going to make purple instead of a red. So a flat colored material, one option is that you can, there's a flat color where it renders exactly that color and there's no lighting taken into account. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like matte paint. So we go in here, we've got our default material, we set its specular to black, and we set its diffuse color to whatever it is that we want. So let's go over here and just pick a red. What did I say? No, I said green. Let's make it a greenish color. And there it is. And it looks, that actually gets rendered quite accurately in the viewport. Let me just render that. Now this is a radiosity render, so you'll actually see some color bleeding into nearby objects because things will reflect light onto each other. So if you look really closely here, you might see some green leaking into not really. But anyway, there's a flat green elephant. So the next one is, let's make shiny plastic, and the default behavior, so let's call this flat green. The default texture, and I'm just going to duplicate that, and we'll delete this material here. And this is going to be plastic, green plastic. The default material with its specular is looks like plastic. So if I go and change it to like medium grey, and I change the highlight, I'll make it the higher this value, the shinier it is. I'm going to make it a lot less shiny. You see, as I make it less shiny, the highlight gets bigger, but I also need to reduce the brightness of the reflection to make it less shiny. Specular is a hack. Anyway, I'll drag that on there. Now I want to render this. Go and have a look at the lighting setup here. We've got a radiosity tag and a main light. Let's bring back the renderer. So because we have a light and we're not using image-based lighting, specular highlights still work here. And so you can see there's kind of a shininess here, which is missing from the flat version. Okay, so that's specular. But a much better approach to making something shiny is to actually use blurred reflections. Slower, but it looks nicer. So let me just do a second green plastic, and let's call this reflective green plastic. And there I'm going to take the specular and I'm going to make it black. I'm going to make the reflection and I'll make that a dull grey. Reflections look much brighter in the preview than they actually tend to look in real life, in actual renders. And I'll make it 0.2, which is very, very blurry. And we'll drag that onto this object and we'll delete this other image mapping and we'll render it. And you'll actually see some reflections on the elephant. So you'll get reflections on things, but it'll also look like highlights. Now, one problem that you'll have is that our light doesn't have any geometry, and that means that it doesn't reflect. The light won't reflect properly onto the scene, which is a shortcoming of Cheetah 3D really. So we get some nice reflections, and we do get some kind of shiny highlights, but those shiny highlights result of objects that are being lit, being reflected onto the object. So it doesn't look like a mirror finish. It looks like a shiny object, but what's missing are the highlight here, for example, is missing. And that highlight was essentially a reflection of a pretend light. Well, that reflection doesn't exist in this scene, and so we would need to go and substitute something in for it. But still, I think you'll agree that it looks much nicer, much more interesting than the specular lit object. So the hard rubber object, which I've got, is essentially like our green plastic, except that so we'll call this hard rubber. Except that it's darker. It's a dark grey instead of light, and maybe even 10. We could even go down to 5, and we can make ourselves a hard rubber And again, you could do this with reflection instead of with specular, but there we have it. And in fact, you can use reflection and specular if you want to fake the reflected lights and at the same time as have reflections. But there's your hard rubber, and that's not a bad looking hard rubber elephant. Okay, let's get simple now. Let's go and just make it out of metal. So I'm just going to create a new metal. Let's make it steel. Let's delete this shader reference here. We'll drop steel onto it and we'll render it. Now, one of the first things that people do when they take they start ray tracing is they'll drag a metal shader onto something and they'll render it and they'll go, hey, it's black. And as you'll see, this elephant is mostly black because the scene that the elephant is in is mostly empty space. It's basically got a three-sided room, and the rest of the world is nothing. It's black. So when you render it, you get black, and so that's what happens there. Now, if we wanted the universe to be more interesting, we could put in an HDRI background, or we could just build out the universe so that there was something more interesting to reflect. But that's the way it is. And I think that if we yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here. Anyway, so that was steel. If we go back in and we make the steel rough, so we set it to 0.2, then we can get a brush metal effect. Let's render the elephant, and it will produce a blurry reflections on it, so it'll look more like brushed metal or roughened metal. What do you call it? Like the finish on a MacBook Pro, which is a pretty attractive look. And then you can also add an isotropy, which means non-symmetrical roughness. So we can just go over there and make the anisotropy say 0.8, and that makes the roughness in a particular direction. It's based on UV mapping, so however the elephant happens to be UV mapped will control the anisotropy of the reflected object, of the reflections. But actually is again a very attractive looking effect. So that's our brushed metal elephant there. So you compare it, this is without the anisotropy and this is with the anisotropy, and you can see that the reflections are much more the roughness is much more in one direction. And this is the original mirror finish. So we've got our mirror finish steel, our brushed metal elephant, and our roughened metal elephant, and our brushed metal elephant. So that was metal. And again, glass is pretty simple. We can just go over and say we want to do glass. Just again delete this reference. By the way, just if you have a bunch of material assignments, the last one wins, but I'm just keeping it tidy. So if I render the glass elephant, then we will get the expected result. Now blue is coming from the background reflection. I'm not sure why the blue wasn't showing up on the reflected metal. It was before. I think it's a change in the way Cheetah 3D renders by default since this book was first written. But yeah, the blue is from the background, the camera background. So if I go into the camera background here and I change the color to black, let's make it red to prove a point. I render it again. I am wrong, so I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, it doesn't appear to have taken. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Let's not sure what's going on. Click on that, hit red. Delete those two. Oh, the camera's locked. That's the problem. So if I unlocked it and then I change the background color to red and then I lock it again so I don't accidentally shoot myself in the foot, then you'll see that yeah, it's red. So I was actually right, but I got screwed up there. Don't need to demonstrate that. So that was glass. We can do water, same kind of thing. So that's really basic materials with no kind of texture component.